Good morning, good afternoon, and good day, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our 5th webinar in the 2013 IC Compliance and Engagement Enterprise Solutions webinar series. We have a great program today. I'm hoping everybody can get a little bit of opportunity to learn some new information and maybe take a different perspective on how the sourcing talent in 2013 and beyond may be handled in your organization. So before we start, a few housekeeping items. If you have a question, there is a little panel on the right-hand side where you can enter your questions, and I'd like to take questions as they come in. If I don't get to all the questions, I will be able to respond to you directly after the broadcast as well. Just in case anybody's interested, a copy of this deck and the recording will be emailed to any of the registrants and attendees. Will also be available on our website in a couple of days. And when you do visit our website, be sure you sign up for our Contractor Engagement Quarterly Newsletter to get the latest updates on what's happening in the independent workforce movement and the latest on MBO research, products, and services. So our title today, and I want to get started, Sourcing Talent for 2013 and Beyond, Whose Job Is It Anyway? Little preface to get this started and put us all in the right mind frame. It's been increasingly clear that the talent shortage that we might have experienced in the recession is back. Before the recession, it was pretty tight finding talent. It seemed to have gotten a little bit easier, and it's back in full vengeance. But we've also changed the rules of the game a little bit. A recent report from Staffing Industry Analysts states that about 16% of the contingent workforce sourced in 2012 was done by companies themselves, not by the temporary agencies. So that's actually a pretty big increase over prior years. And of that number, there was a 30% increase in the use of independent contractors. Now people are actually thinking that independent contractors might be making up a quarter of the total contingent workforce. We're also hearing that in addition to the traditional recruiting that talent acquisition offices are doing at our clients, they're also finding contingent independent talent and engaging them through some sort of third party like MBO or payrolling firm or one of their staffing vendors. So it sounds like, similar to the way that Europe has been behaving for a number of years, they're actually doing the recruitment for any talent in the organization and then finding ways to engage them based on those individual preferences and situations. Kind of a novel approach, maybe moving more towards what we saw, the total talent approach emerging prior to the recession. Now getting a little bit more steam. Our RPO companies have been doing this for a while. I think we're starting to see this infiltrate more of the general talent acquisition climate. So let's also talk about another aspect, which I think we'll get into through our research, and that's the trend that's making this even more challenging. Since many of these talented consultants see themselves as businesses of one or professional service vendors, procurement strategic sourcing is getting into the act. They feel it's a bit of their responsibility to bring vendors in, so they want to at least find a way to enable their users to get access to this talent. Typically, procurement finds people, consultants, through their large SOW contracts with bigger firms, things like the Accentures and the other large consulting firms. They have multiple resources. They assume a greater scope of responsibilities. But more often than not, the work can be actually completed by a single resource. So the business or the engaging managers do it through people they know, maybe ex-employees, maybe someone who's gone out on their own as a consultant, seems to be a common practice. Then procurement is asked to engage them or onboard them as an approved vendor so they could get paid. Even though this has risks associated with it, and I think anybody who's dialed into this webinar series knows what these risks are of bringing on an independent contractor. The work needs to be done. Somehow they get it done. The bottom line, smart companies are doing what they need to find this tough talent, find it with the right skill, and if they're doing it, they're finding that they've got a competitive advantage in the market. And even in the most competitive markets, this is something that I think most companies are finding a challenge, but they're going to get it done because it has to get done. But how are they doing it, and whose job is it? That's today's topic, so let's get started. Let me introduce a couple of folks. First of all, my name is Jay Lash. I'm the Vice President of Market Strategies for MBO Partners and your host for the series. Joining me today are two talent acquisition specialists I've known for a number of years. And to me, they represent two sides of this whole movement. We have Marianne Garcia representing more of the corporate side. She's been in talent acquisition for a number of years. She's currently the Senior Manager Recruiting for Inside Enterprises. Marianne's been recruiting high-level talent in IT and other technical fields for over 20 years. Today she leads a large team of internal staffing professionals covering North America. Inside is one of the largest enterprise hardware, software, and service resellers in the United States. Her team fills about 100 requirements a month. I've known Marianne for a number of years, and since she started recruiting at least. And I know that she's experienced every kind of recruiting challenge, from recessions to depressions, as well as some of the bubbles that have burst in some of the technology areas. And she's always come through with finding the right person. So Marianne, welcome. Say hi, Marianne.
Here, Jay.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here, Jay. Thanks.
And also, I brought Ali Dagan, representing more of the entrepreneurial side of recruiting. She's a kind of a serial technology entrepreneur, also known, Ali, for a number of years. She's been an executive recruiter in the Seattle area, Seattle, Washington area. She's also been sort of on her own as a contracted gun-for-hire recruiter for companies like Starbucks or Intellectual Ventures, Amazon. She started and sold a very successful RPO practice. She's done some really innovative things with software that will help companies and recruiters find the right talent. And again, I've known her for a number of years, and to me, nobody has more passion and is committed to finding top talent than Ali and helping recruiters do their jobs more effectively. So great to have you, Ali.
Great to be here. Thank you, Jay.
So let's start with a general topic, and I'd like to at least set the tone this way. We all know that engaging independent contractors presents some risk. Misclassification, possibly even some things like class action lawsuits, state penalties, Department of Labor, maybe even issues of disbarment if you're doing government work, the brand damage, the management distraction, the audits. It's obviously a little bit more than people bargain for, so there's quite often a restriction of companies. I remember back in the 80s, right, if you found a resource that was independent, you either turned the other cheek or you just found someone else. Sending a 1099 to a company was kind of frowned upon, mainly because of the risks associated, and kind of created a scare by the class action suit against Microsoft back in the 90s. But still today, as much as we say that, Aberdeen Group says that 32% of companies reported they've been audited by state unemployment authorities. So the risk is actually increasing, and it's not just the IRS, it's the state. So you have to admit, recruiting has changed many levels since both of you guys got started. Now the talent has the upper hand. And if you want to have a 1099, you want to operate independently, you can't just ignore that. You have to be dealing with it. So let's start with you, Marianne, kind of a broad question. You've been recruiting for years. What's the biggest difference in recruitment challenges today?
Right. So thanks, Jay. So the biggest challenge that we face in recruiting, especially when it comes to the technical talent pool in our professional services division, is not actually finding the talent, but rather how to engage them. So a lot of the highly sought after top talent that we're trying to hire doesn't necessarily want to be an employer of any one employer. So they're at a point in their career where they have the experience and the certifications, and now they're ready and they can afford to basically pick and choose when and where and how much they go to work for. So being a full-time employee of a company really isn't appealing to them. This is certainly an area where MBO Partners has really helped us. Up until about 2 years ago, Insight simply just didn't do it. We turned the other cheek. And then, often what would happen is we would see these same resources that we would have found but couldn't engage come through staffing companies, and now we're actually paying more for them, right, because of the associated markups. So essentially, since we've engaged with MBO, we've been able to engage the top talent directly, and we're able to afford to hire, the top caliber resources because we're not paying the agency fees.
Mm-hmm.
When you wrap strong project management around a resource that's a contingent worker or an independent consultant, it should be seamless and irrelevant to our client how the resource gets paid, right? So as long as the resource conducts themselves by utilizing the insight methodologies and presents themselves as insight, again, it's irrelevant if they're on a salary or hourly or being paid by milestones, 60s, or what have you.
So in a way, what you're saying is
Mm-hmm.
the biggest difference in recruitment today is that you've got a broader spectrum of candidates to recruit, and you've got more options if you take advantage of those options to engage them. So maybe it's changed,
Correct.
but it isn't necessarily more difficult. As you said, it's how do you engage the talent once you find them. Cool. Allie, you've done some pretty high-level searches in the past, and most of them being for C-level executives, top talent, the best in the field. So what is it that you think has influenced your business the most?
Yes, thank you. Well, I would call out a few themes today. I'd say, first of all, the talent out there is more empowered. The blog sphere, social media, there are many more vehicles by which talented people can take the responsibility to steward their reputations and their careers and actually generate demand for their future services with what they do today. So it can take many forms, like who will be their future references and what will they actually get to accomplish that's closer to the bleeding edge.
Mm-hmm.
On the employer side or the client side, I'd say somebody moved the cheese, if you will, in that radical transparency is upon us.
Mm-hmm.
And that everybody who's out there is now viewable through a web browser, and we have these global talent pools full of telecommuters and folks that will compete in all sorts of new ways. So I'd say it's a new game.
Yeah, great. And you know what? You guys have set the tone perfectly. This is exactly why the challenge has occurred for corporate America that says, as you said, who moved my cheese? What happened? I thought talent acquisition did all the recruiting. Now it seems to be falling on my plate. And you could be anything from procurement to legal to the business line manager. So it's a new game. For that reason, I think one of the things that MBO has been doing for the last 3 years has been doing some research on this market. There's not a lot of data out on this independence movement. So we hired this organization, Emergent Research. They brought in Rockbridge to do a quantitative and qualitative survey of 2,000 U.S. residents. What's really interesting, and we'll share this data during the course of today's presentation, there's also a complete report on our website, the State of Independence for the last 3 years. What's really interesting about this research is it gives us not only some details about the size and the scope and the trends in this market, but also a little insight into the why. Why are people doing this? What do they like? You used to know your employees because you had a whole group of them, and you could kind of profile their competencies and so on. Well, again, things have changed. The independent is a whole nother category, and you have to be aware of what that means. So let's share some of that research and then get your take on it, guys. Number one, key ingredient is the number. We're talking about a growth track that is bringing up 2013 numbers at about 17.7 million workers see themselves as independents. And they describe themselves this way as they're working over 15 hours a week, they're 21 years or older, they're people that are self-employed, fixed-term contract, independents, freelancers, maybe temp agency workers, whatever it is, they're not affiliated directly with one company and they don't see themselves as the employee of anyone. So that's an interesting stat. Aberdeen, who also does some research in this area, looked at organizations and said, the contingent workforce, 26% is independent contractors or independent talent. So there's another dimension that you can't ignore. It's a pretty large number of your workforce. Another great stat which has been teaching us a lot, and that is the demographics of this independent workforce. No big surprise that the boomers make up 33%. That's been kind of a common thing, that you get to a certain age and you operate more independently and you become a consultant. You hit retirement that might give you a 25-year payoff out of your government relationship or with a company for a number of years, and you can afford to just consult on the side. The rules are changing. Boomers can't necessarily afford to retire. They're working full-time, and they were doing it independently. The more interesting stat, though, is Gen X and Gen Y. With the numbers like that, we're seeing the upcoming generations already as independents and will continue to grow as independents. So that, to me, is the more staggering fact. And then what's on the horizon for these independents? This is something that we've been tracking, and we think, and there's a lot of evidence from a lot of other researchers that say over the next decade, 50% of the workforce will at least spend some time working as an independent. We think those numbers can be actually more dramatic and before the end of this decade. Interestingly enough, these are the seeds of small business. 14%, or 2.5 million, plan to build bigger businesses from their independent practices, and that's up from 12% last year. And only 1 in 7 want to return to traditional jobs. So what was contrary to the, let's say, the talking heads who said, you know what, everybody's independent because they couldn't find a job. Well, I think if anybody who's in recruiting or working for a company today, they know the jobs are out there. They just may not be the way they looked prior to the recession, and traditional jobs aren't the most attractive opportunity for people to make this move. So I think we're learning things are changing. So let's say that organizations are a little fearful that they may not be able to access this talent if they don't have the right engagement practices or engagement options. So let's turn it back to our panelists and say, do you find that big companies have cumbersome processes for onboarding or approval to get these independents in? And if they do, what are the ways to overcome some of that process? And why don't we start with you again, Mary Ann? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it was a very cumbersome process for us to onboard ICs. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, we simply didn't do it. Before we signed up with MBO partners, we turned the other cheek. But that kind of forced the managers to find a way around the process, and that, of course, led to compliance and onboarding issues. So we had to find a solution fast. And so basically what we did was we embraced it, right? We now have a policy and procedure and a program that includes the use of independent consultants. And we've been able to streamline the use of all contract laborers through our HR recruiting teams. And this new process, of course, is much faster and easier, not to mention, cost effective than certainly having the managers go out directly to the agencies themselves.
So you see that there are options. So finding the talent, there are ways now to make sure you've got the right talent and worry about how you engage them after you find or locate that talent. I've kind of listed out here on the screen a couple of popular engagement options that are out there. I didn't list MBO, but certainly, as you said, MBO is one of those options. May cover just about any of these circumstances. How about you, Allie? What are you seeing out there?
Right. So I agree generally with Mary Ann, but I would add that I've seen ownership of the question of protecting the company's interests kind of leak outside of human resources and even procurement and into more of risk management committee levels in some organizations. I've seen and heard the chief financial officer's organization become much more interested in sort of auditing and understanding, the devil they know and the devil they don't when it comes to where their payroll dollars are going. And finally, I've been watching webinar series for general counsel's offices to say, here's how you support and partner with your HR leadership. I'll try to crystallize by saying, Jay, that I'm starting to think that it's the more strategic human resources and procurement leaders that proactively get their heads around what's actually going on, because otherwise, they might be surprised, and you sure don't want to be surprised when it's too late.
Yeah.
Finally,
great point. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Finally, I'd say there's real authenticity, in my opinion, in showing your top talent, your knowledge workforce, those people that you worked really hard to engage, that you've listened to how they want to be engaged and provided a safe way forward for everybody.
You know, that brings up kind of another point, and I think there's a lot to be said for those organizations, you said, the more progressive, those forward-thinking companies that recognize that the real risk in bringing an independent contractor on isn't necessarily the way they're engaged or the classification, although we know that that's the law and we understand, but is it really if they're happy, if they're satisfied, if they're engaged in doing the job? Your risk quotient goes way, way down. And one of the things we're finding in this research is that independent workers are more satisfied than their traditional workers. And we're seeing the numbers pretty consistently ranging 60-70% versus what the Society of Human Resource Management says about 38% of traditional employees consider themselves to be happy or satisfied with the work that they're doing. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for the risk and how to protect yourselves. And Allie, great points. It's something that a number of stakeholders in the organization need to be accountable for. But including that is the line managers, the people that need to get the work done. So we can't make it more difficult for them. So what are some of the driving force? I just listed a few of these things that we've recognized: technology making it easier, traditional jobs harder to find but also less attractive, demographic and social shifts, the way people are looking at their careers, looking at their business as being kind of their own brand, and also being kind of a different value system in flexibility and work-life balance, the shifting family structures. I think independent work used to be, oh, you couldn't find a real job, so you got an independent job, right? You're a consultant. Now I think it's moved to the other side. It's almost like entrepreneurship and consulting is seen as being cool. You know, the next Mark Zuckerberg is going to come out of that. So, Allie, let's go back to you, because I've seen you emerge as the entrepreneur of some of the earlier recruiters that I worked with over the years. You know, people have a realistic attitude about what it is to be self-employed, and are these the things that are driving it, or are there more involved?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's a pretty mixed bag, to be frank about it. I don't think independent consulting's for everyone, because as some interesting authors recently pointed out, we live in a culture that prepares most people for traditional employment on which they come to rely for their stability. However, I would say increasingly, and yes, I'm one of them, and thank you for, I consider it a compliment that you see me as an early adopter in this way, Jay. But increasingly, I see that people are more willing to learn how to engage individually in the world or independently in the world, and that they realize that in doing so, they can build a portfolio of clients, not just rely on one, and they can decide actively and strategically what they're going to learn and who they're going to learn it from. So they can manage, they learn that they can drive their own boat even more. And are people prepared to do that? Increasingly so, but across the board, maybe half of us, my guess.
Yeah, so it isn't for everybody. I think you're right on there. And maybe some people get into it not knowing what level of responsibility entrepreneurship takes. So there's a little bit of that, the boomerang effect, right? Try it, not for me, going back. But also, you brought up a great point, and we're seeing in the economy, our CEO calls these folks, the entrepreneurs, the job makers, and we see the more traditional employees more as job takers. And with that little divergence here, job makers are the fuel of the future economy, and the job takers are becoming a little bit more of the dependency and the entitlement community that has been very sluggish in our return from the recession. So great points. You know, Marianne, I want to bring something up that you also said to me, which was a number of years ago. You said that it used to be the American dream was to own your own home. Now it seems like the American dream is to own your own business, even if it's a business of one. So how do you think that's changed the way workers position themselves in their careers?
Yeah, sure, Jay. So yeah, I mean, it seems like 1 out of every 3 people I talk to these days either is thinking of or going to start their own company. So they're positioning themselves with other experts in the industry and building those relationships that later turn into direct business leads. I think it's important to recognize and point out why the IC population is growing so rapidly. There's a couple of factors here. One is probably the lack of company loyalty and or benefits, and the idea that having one employer for life is pretty much gone. Most companies don't have a pension plan anymore, other benefits that outweigh what you can set up on your own. And if you have an entrepreneurial spirit and mind, you may get into the point where you simply outgrow your career, maybe the same way you do, your house, right? If we compare it again to the American dream of owning a home. Another reason may be the fact that you have more dual income families. So you have an two-income household family will enable one to take greater risks in their career, right? And then maybe even something to do with, of course, the fact that technology has enabled us to become experts or to be seen as experts much quicker than it was in the 90s. So these experts are able to incorporate and start up a company basically overnight. Certainly with unified communications, you never even have to step foot in quote-unquote office. You can work anywhere in the world, and the client wouldn't know the difference, right? So I think having your own business provides you that same sense of freedom that you felt when you bought your first home, but of course it doesn't come without some of the same financial burdens and responsibilities. So taxes, insurance, expenses, these are all things someone has to take care of in addition to performing the work.
Yeah, I have to say, Marianne, you bring up something that kind of reminds me a little bit about how some of the independents that I've met got their start, and maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that they saw maybe their parents or grandparents go through some phase of unemployment, how it shattered their lives, and they never want to be caught in that position again, or they feel that they're not going to let that happen to their lives or their families. But we're also taking a look at some of the data that we got from the motivations of these workers, and that's the idea that workers today want to follow their passion, want to do what they love, want to be their own boss. These are the numbers that we're seeing that represent that. So it's not really just about going to work and making more money. In fact, it's down at the bottom of the list, making more money. We used to be, I don't think I remembered a consultant who didn't tell me they did it because they wanted to make more money. So now its growth is coming from more of the above, more of the following your passion. So you guys are spot on. I want to get into another topic quickly, and that is how do these people find their work? And maybe this is something that we could get into a little bit more detail. Before I go on, Allie, am I right on in your perspective that this is what's really driving? This is more of that. The growth is driving more of that personal interest in developing their own business and their own freedom and purpose in life.
Well, I think so, and miraculously, the social media realities today allow us to really leverage who we know and more importantly, who trusts us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. So I'm gonna show this slide, then I'm going to go back to you again, Allie, to talk about what you're seeing in the way people find work. But no big surprise, 73% of our dependents tell us that they found their work through word of mouth, referrals. Their reputation is really what gets them their work. And they spend about 70%, 5 to 20% of their time looking for new opportunities and networking. So it's a considerable part of their business every day, which kind of tells you something else, that when they're working for you, they're probably also working for the next job. But maybe something that is not as clear with all the new technology for online marketplaces or job boards or other things that might make it what appeared to be easy to find work. Only 3% say that they're doing it through those channels. So, Allie, before I give Marianne a chance to comment on this, what do you think is really the driver for finding work? How does that happen?
Well, it's probably a derivative of the type of work that one does, but I'd say it all comes down to reputation and who knows you and who's willing to refer you to their friends and advisors. Further, I'd say that increasingly the social media and blog sphere realities allow people to become more strategic around their cultivating of activities. As an example, if I want to go learn about an industry, I have some pet interests like medical device, for example, intellectual property. I'll run little mini campaigns against the information I can get out there. Who's really moving? Who's been invested in? Who's filing the patents? And then pitch to, say, 10 or 20 businesses at a time and get some small return to say, hey, sure, we'll talk with you. And so I think increasingly there are more sort of industrial ways to scale up your exposure to penetrating a marketplace. But you have to have some intention around doing that.
But that's really great advice. So if some of these companies that are listening today were looking for these experts and they knew that getting an independent was the likely source and going to a job board and all that was not going to find them, then doing a little bit of your homework and identifying who these people are, and then go on a campaign and see if you can generate some interest so that they move to you and they find their opportunities that way. Marianne, let's hear about what corporate America is finding as these independents finding their work.
Sure, and I mean, I typically agree. So the primary way, of course, is referrals and networking in general. LinkedIn is probably the biggest platform for connecting recruiters with the talent. I mean, you have your Elance and Solo Gig, Monster, Dice, Career Builder, all those sites, but we're actually moving more away from those avenues. We really haven't needed to engage with those searches because LinkedIn has been so, it's worked so well for us. There's various groups you can join, and at the same time as connecting with talent, you're also learning about the technologies and the solutions that are out there. LinkedIn is a great way for two-way communication, through emails and in-mails rather. And you can also do job share postings so that it's 3 simple clicks. You can share your jobs out on LinkedIn with your entire network and your network's network, right? But I agree. I mean, the key really for independent consultants to finding consistent work is really, as we mentioned earlier, is to perform so well and to build your reputation so that companies call you back, right? So at Insight, we actually have a SharePoint portal that our hiring managers and practice directors and certainly resource managers and recruiters have access to, and this is the place where we store all of our independent consultants, what we call our virtual bench. And when we don't have a full-time salaried consultant to engage, we go to this virtual bench because it makes it much easier to engage a proven resource that's already worked for us before than certainly going out and trying to find another resource or hiring a full-time resource that we may not need on a longer-term basis. So in a sense, you could say once you're established as an independent consultant, the work kind of finds you.
Great point. In fact, I've used this term, the network economy. It came from an HR paper, Harvard Business Review, on the way that all business is operating today, not just independent business people and work getting done, but generally the way the economy is operating. We've got these networks, and they're so well established, whether it be through Facebook or your LinkedIn contacts or in your own local network. That's the business exchange now. That's where business is being done, and it's being done more effectively than going through stores or, for that matter, even the earlier online tools. So you trust somebody who you know versus maybe somebody who's trying to sell you something. WorkMarket is a company that we partnered with, which is a software platform, allows companies to build sort of a curated pool of talent. So a lot of our clients are moving towards this sort of, as you said, your SharePoint site. This one is more of a SharePoint site on steroids in the sense that it brings other functionality, not just bringing in who's available and who's worked for you before. So I think what you're really getting at is if a company is taking ownership for this this group of talent and this new resource for them, they need to invest in it through tools that'll give their managers, give their businesses greater ease of accessing and reusing this talent on a continuous basis. So great points, guys. So let's get into the real topic. Whose job is it anyway? I don't really want to say that it's any one person's job, but I think that everybody is kind of sharing. You guys have done a great job sort of setting this up, and that is that there are a variety of stakeholders that are involved. And those stakeholders could be anything from talent acquisition through the actual project and the managers themselves. So let's get to some of the answers. Whose job do you think it is? Mary Ann, give us your insight from Insight.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's everybody's job, right? So, at Insight, we hire about 50 to 80 full-time hires a month and another 10 to 15 contractors, of which inevitably 5 of them will be ICs. And, the full-time hires that we hire are usually inside sales resources, and we typically see a large referral, most of them coming from our referral program. So certainly that's, everybody in our company referring candidates in and, hiring managers as well. Our college recruiting program also has been effective in terms of hiring inside sales resources. And again, we ask our hiring managers to take part in that. So it's not just recruiting, it's definitely everybody. But recruiting really facilitates it, right? Okay. When I look at the other 2 areas that we hire heavily in, that would be our product marketing group. That's another great area where our teammate referral program generates most of the hires. And then when we look at, IT and services, that's really where we get a flurry of referrals, but that's really where our recruiting team focuses on finding that talent. And again, we're challenged by the fact that a lot of the highly sought after talent that we need and the caliber that we need just simply doesn't want to be full-time. So we have to find a way to engage the ICs, and so our recruiters do that, and, through the programs that we have set up. And it really makes for a nice mix of the workforce. So,
Let me battle a little between the 2 of you. Allie, I want to kind of get your perspective on this. You've worked with HR and talent organizations, right? And you've done some C-level type startup recruiting. Are there different approaches now that companies are using in terms of assigning this role? Who is it that has to find the talent in the organization? Yeah. Or is it more organic in the way that it's working?
Absolutely. I'd say that things are moving around. So while it is, I agree with you, Mary Ann, everybody's job, I'd say there are a couple of power hitters in the mix in most organizations, regardless of their size, as to how to enable the efficacy of recruiting. First of all, procurement can pave the way to making it easy to engage this kind of talent. And they can scale that easy process. They have the ability to do that. So they can remove impediments across organizations. Another one is the policymakers, often sitting in HR and maybe somewhere else, can make tiny adjustments in employee referral programs to embrace and compensate the individual or the independent contractor. Because today, many employee referral programs really reflect traditional employment gains, and that's it. Lastly, I'm going to plug my fellow recruiters because, and this is something that fascinates me, Jay, when a crafty recruiter really listens to a hiring manager or a client and develops a job description that viralizes nicely on the web, that thing will be evangelized by people other than the recruiter and the employee base of that company. And now you're really in modern recruiting.
Right. You know, I'm going to go back to Marianne now. To something you said earlier, Marianne, and certainly the way that I perceive a large organization like Insight, heavily matrix kind of organization. You have internal customers in recruiting, and I'm sure procurement has internal customers. You know, everybody kind of is doing what they can to serve ultimately your end customer, right? So does anybody in your organization overarch all of this, let's say workforce planning, or somebody in a strategic sense say, we're going to have a mix of these many or that many employees? Does that operate in your firm?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, in professional services, I mean, we have over 600 salaried consultants, right, that do project-based work. I mean, at some point, I mean, we have 7 resource managers that manage their calendars. I mean, you can't keep hiring, right? So you have to, you have to augment your workforce with contingent workers or your traditional contract workers, because depending on what the project is, you may just need extra hands and feet, or you may need somebody that brings a skill set that you don't otherwise have on the team, and that's really, again, where the ICs come into play. So, but yeah, we definitely, we look at a 70-30 mix, so 70% is really more of our full-time salaried consultants that go from project to project to project that, we invest in, we train in, we pay bench time and that kind of thing, and then the other 30% are those independent consultants that we mix in, to augment.
Yeah, and that's the strategic kind of guiding plan for your organization. Has that changed over the years, or is that kind of a static?
Well, I would say it's changed a little bit, but it's been static over the last 5 years, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Allie? Is that something you're seeing? Is it moving one way or the other, the mix of this talent, and is it HR workforce planning roles to set that mix?
Yeah, I would say the changes that I've seen really more in better regulated, larger organizations is that HR may or may not capture this wave or get out ahead of it, but somebody somewhere is going to emerge to own it, hopefully before they've reached a point where there's some pain or risk for the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where the real opportunity comes in too, because if your organization has embraced it, I think Aberdeen Group, in the last report they did earlier this year, I think in May, they reported that 46% of organizations said that their use of independent contract is a way to gain a competitive advantage. And it's maybe obvious in some industries. You look at the movie industry, for example, and they're all independent, right? From the producer to the gaffer and the caterer, they're all independent. And if they all decided to change to now a hiring-only model, could they possibly be competitive? So we know in the extreme examples elsewhere that if a company is able to do this in a way that's compliant, that enables the business to take this initiative, in addition to retaining good quality traditional employees, they could be competitively more attractive for the resources and probably even economically do a better job with the resources they have from a cost perspective. So nice summary, you guys, and I do agree. It's not one stakeholder's job. It's a way of rethinking the way talent comes in, goes, and contributes to your organization. So I'm gonna kind of keep this slide up for a minute while I bring up another question, because today enterprises are making these transformational moves to respond to this trend. Some organizations, I'll give an example. One of our clients, almost 50%. This is not a small company. This is one of the Fortune 50 companies. 50% of their organization is non-employee, and they're doing more and more to manage that group of non-employee resources, to empower them to contribute in innovative work teams, to move through the organization and share the knowledge they've gained. So it really is, something of an innovative trend. But these are the things that organizations need to do to more or less make this change effective. So let's talk a little bit about what you guys have seen effectively in organizations, whether it be your own or whether it be in organizations you've worked with in the past. So what's the effective way to get this talent into your organization, retained, and optimized? So let's say, Marianne, you're the hands-on recruiter and have been for years. What do you think are the most effective techniques you and your organization have used?
Again, leveraging those referral programs, leveraging, as Ali mentioned, the way we rewrite our job descriptions, because, a lot of corporate organizations have canned job descriptions, and we really need to tailor them to exactly what we're looking for at that time. We have our recruiters structured in a way that they're aligned to technology niches instead of geographics, because the way the searching now runs, people know each other across the nation, so especially when you're talking about independent consultants. So we have our recruiting teams work in teams that align to our practices. So really leverage the referral teammate program that we have set up at Insight.
Mm-hmm. Do you find some sort of I don't know, the right carrot or the right incentive to attract this talent? Is there something you guys are doing that might be a little different that makes this, an assignment with Insight the assignment of choice?
Definitely the work, right? So the projects that we have and the technologies that we're using. So the solutions that we're building for our clients are innovative, and it's not, it's not your operations-based work, and it's not, commoditized. It's more bleeding edge in some cases, right? So.
So do you think, Ali, do we cover all the different options out there for organizations to maybe take a different approach to embrace this talent, or do you get any other ideas?
Well, Jay, I have a few up my sleeve.
All right, sure.
All right.
We figured that, Ali. We were hoping that. Wait, let me get my pen.
A few days, in all sincerity, I have some advice for folks trying to break out of the box of traditional recruiting, because I love to tell my customers and colleagues, 5 years ago I could slap out, and there was a push to today's pull in getting people's attention. List or Monster, or even a LinkedIn ad, and hope I got the right folks back. And that is just not the case anymore. So a few days before I head out to source something, I do two things. One, I change my LinkedIn groups to reflect what it is I'm after. All of us, no matter what, if we pay anything to LinkedIn, we get 50 groups. So if I ungroup somewhere, I can group in somewhere else. And if I get accepted, guess what? I now have little established niche markets I can speak to for free. And secondly, I go around and invite maybe 20 of the people that look to me to be thought leaders, innovators. They've done the right things to really market themselves, and I'll probably learn something more about the spec I'm facing if I talk to them. And I'll go out and invite them to my network. So basically, I design and launch small digital campaigns that I can observe and predict. And over time, I can count on about a 20% affirmative response within about 72 hours to what I launch as a search in that way. And I'm addicted to that. It helps me kind of know. It's kind of like, Jay, you taught me this at farming. You wouldn't put all your seeds in the earth at one time, because how could you harvest all at once? So little campaigns of direct mail and very thoughtfully communicated sources outside of relying upon who comes to you is my advice.
Boy, great. And that's a great way to take something as old as I am, which is excited, and used in today's new setting, which obviously is much more powerful than the, I used to tell the stories when I recruited. We'd go back in the old files of old applicants and grab their references on a yellow copy of their application and start calling these people looking for referrals. You know what? We made money, we filled jobs, but boy, what you're talking about is just so much more efficient and effective. Ellie, one more thing, and you brought this up to me a while ago, and I think there's a great application to this. You said that with the advent of big data, companies have access to so much more information and analytics. How do you see that applying to this new trend?
Oh, my favorite question. Well, again, in years past, I would say to my clients, you hired a recruiter to help you access people you don't know. And today, it's my belief, and increasingly moving forward, that employers have to bring on recruiters that can help them deal with the overwhelming radical transparency that's available. We can all see everyone else, and we could break our inboxes in so doing. So rather than dive into the detail, Jay, I'll say that leveraging big data assets in a rational way raises the confidence of your decision. In that, and there are lots and lots of ways to do this, but in a nutshell, if you're resource constrained and you're kind of in survival mode, my observation over time is you hire the first person you think you can get by with. With big data assets and a little bit of structure, you hire the best person you can find, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time.
Big difference. Mary Ann, your comments are tipped in the same vein.
Oh, Allie's the expert there. I'll just say I would echo what she said. I mean, yeah.
I think you did say something that I want to point out. I'm going to give you a chance to state this part, but you said you're seeing kind of a paradigm shift in your organization that you've initiated. That's taking more of that proactive approach. Kind of give us a little summary of what that means.
Sure, yeah. So what we're starting to do is, I mean, we're the traditional, fill, open a rec, get it approved, post it, recruit candidates, that kind of thing. And we're taking more of an approach of, looking for talent, identifying the talent, and then that fits our culture and our skill sets, and then proactively marketing them to the managers. Because, again, I keep mentioning our teammate referral program. I mean, top talent knows other top talent, and you take away a lot of the uncertainty on a hire when you know somebody that you've worked with before, and you can actually recommend them, and you know that they're a proven resource and that they do good work. And so, basically, what we are doing more of is, screening people in, right? Again, that cultural fit, that skill set fit, and talking to the managers about them and creating opportunities and filling recs that way. I mean, of course, we still have the needs that, that are currently open that we're looking to fill, but when we've recognized top talent, we're really trying to find a way to engage them, whether it's full-time or independent or what have you. And simply put, some of our hiring managers don't know what their options are. So it's really our recruiting team's job to tell them what the options are. And again, some cases you may not need or want to hire full-time, but you don't know what your options are. So it's really an education that we have going on here at Insight.
That's great. And it is. It's a huge culture shift. It's a huge paradigm shift. And companies typically, certainly in the traditional employment sense, you could be the ideal person walking in the door, but if there's no rec to match you, you'd say goodbye. And that's, remember when we used to have our job fairs and we used to get these people walking through? Would you ever say no to an experienced EE with, Motorola background and embedded systems designed for aircraft? No, you'd find a way to put that person to work in the talented area that they're in demand. It's now up to the resource to be flexible to go where that requirement is. So I'm kind of running out of time. You guys have been absolutely great. What a wealth of information. I'm going to do a very, very quick summary, a couple of things, and tell me if I missed anything. But sounds like, number one, change the way you look at talent sourcing in your organization. There's a lot of different contributors, a lot of different stakeholders. Allow your functional groups like procurement to enable your management to ease the process and get people and have more options for engagement. Use the networks and the systems and the knowledge that your organization, from your users through the organization, have, and put them into systems that allow you to bring those right people in. Be proactive in the sense when you recruit, when you find talent, don't limit it to the recs, don't limit it to the engagement model of a traditional employee. Be open to that independent talent and resource. and maybe at last of all in this theme of whose job is it, it really becomes the role of an organization who's doing this sort of planning strategically for talent into this organization to broaden that funnel and open it up to the monstrous talent communities that are out there. But just give yourself the tools so you're not flooded. Give yourself the tools to allow you to hone that down, get to the right, so as Ali said, not necessarily the first person, but the best person for the job, because they're out there, and it's hardly what I would consider to be the talent shortage that everybody's complaining about. I think it's an enablement challenge, not a talent challenge. Any last comments for you guys before we wrap it up? Guys,
you know, Jay, I'm just glad you're out there enabling people and bringing such good clarity to the subject. It's an exciting time.
It is. It is. It's exciting for us. MBO has been doing a lot of things over the last few years that are so different than what we did in our foundation. We just can't wait to share it with other people. So, you know, I've got a few questions that seemed a little bit more specific to the individual, so I'm going to respond to some of those offline. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to move into the wrap-up here. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Ali. We appreciate all of you in the audience attending these webinars. I'm going to open up a last opportunity for you guys because I have one more webinar coming up in 2013, kind of making it the viewer's choice. If you wouldn't mind, send me what you think is important in this subject area to talk about. Give me your topic. What would you like to see and hear about? And I'll do my best to not only provide you an interesting topic, but get you these kind of experts like Marianne and Ali to share their insights. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Please go visit our website and sign up for our Engagement Quarterly newsletter, and also we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jay.